AISD schools in Windsor Park and the schools that we zone to. We do that by volunteering directly in the schools, joining their CACs, joining their PTAs, creating relationships so we know what's going on, advocating at a district level. I printed out an old message from our schools committee from 2022 about the broken feeder pattern in Windsor Park. So we've been doing this for a while. And we invite trustees and AISD staff from central office to our neighborhood association meetings for important conversations. We also promote the great things about our schools to try to encourage people to attend the school that they're zoned to. I would love if somebody could help me round up information about each school and get it into the Window on Windsor newsletter every month. Just like a tiny bit about what's going on at that school, rather than what is Bertha Sadler means. I've never heard of it. Where is it? Like, we should all at least know what our schools are and a little bit about them. And then we also help with coordinating, promoting, fundraising the Windsor Park scholarship for high school seniors. We usually give out around $10,000 a year to seniors in high school, primarily at Northeast and LBJ. So that is what we do. If you're interested, please join us. And thank you for being here. So we are joined. Yes. Spanish. Does anybody need Spanish interpretation? ¿Hay alguien aquí que necesita interpretación en español? No, ¿verdad? I don't think. I think we're okay. Thank you for checking. So we're joined by Heather Wong. She's a former instructional coach at Dobie Middle School. Let that sink in. She's the co-founder of ATX 116. She's also the parent of a pre-K4 student at Blanton Elementary who does not qualify to remain at their campus under the current grandfathering rules. Her family was previously zoned to Harris and is now zoned to Andrews Elementary, a community navigating both a consolidation, because they're absorbing WIN students, which is closing, and a targeted improvement plan, while inheriting a turnaround improvement plan from WIN, and Andrews will also be temporarily relocated to the Sims building next year while their campus gets torn down and completely rebuilt in the 2026-2027 school year. So that is Heather's story, and I'm gonna let her take over, and I'll sit down and take notes.
Thanks, Alice.
Thank you.
So just a real quick poll, raise your hand if you're a Windsor Park neighborhood parent or community member. Awesome. University Hills. Hey, Roxanne. Pecan Springs. Thank you for being here. Any other community?
I live in Southwest Austin, but I'm just here as a kid.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. There's some chairs in the back and also some right here when you come in. For our goals today, we're building a shared understanding of this proposal that we got on for last Friday. We're surfacing local insights the district may have missed, trusting that they probably missed some, and developing collective feedback and proposed solutions and suggestions. So this meeting is a problem-solving meeting. And we're going to provide suggestions to the district after this meeting based on what is collectively discussed here. Cool?
We also might just identify problems.
That too.
Right? We
Yep.
might not solve any problems, we might just identify them. That is helpful to them.
Yes, good point. And as you know, like, we give the district representatives and the trustees like our information, but there's power in numbers. So I'll send this collectively, like representing our communities, and we encourage you to send your own individual testimonies and concerns and needs after this directly to them. Okay.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
Is any problem too big that we can't address, or are we gonna whatever we identify we'll send? I just kind of want to understand.
I would encourage us to identify problems and send those concerns as well. Yeah, no matter how big they are foreseen. So we're here to learn, listen, and collaborate. These are our norms. Themes will be summarized and shared with the trustees, and the goal is to clarify the information and try to come up with some solutions and not debate one another. Okay? Okay. So thank you for our panelists for being here. We have Roxanne Evans, a parent of 4 AISD graduates, longtime District 1 advocate, and chair of the East Austin Coalition of Quality Education. Thank you, Roxanne, for being here. We have Nadia Khan, a WIN parent, whose campus is proposed for closure. Under the current plan, WIN students would be rezoned to Pecan Springs and Andrews. Both campuses already navigating turnaround plans. The Montessori program would move 4.5 miles away to a non-zone location, which also impacts the Go Valley Elementary School. Nadia has been deeply engaged in Northeast Austin feeder patterns since 2018 and serves on several district committees. Thank you for being here, Nadia. So these questions were co-created by our community. So if you registered ahead of time, we had some questions. We read all those questions, we compiled them, and that's where these questions come from. There's only 6, so we gathered themes, right? Okay. And each question will be addressed for approximately 3 minutes, given our panel is about 20 minutes long. So I'll keep time as well. So for families new to AISD or Texas, what's most important to understand about our neighborhood's history of schools, boundaries, and feeder patterns? Let's start with you, Roxanne.
Well, I've been in Austin and in District 1 for 40 years. And all of my sons graduated from East Austin schools. And the schools they attended included Wynn, Blanton, Pierce Middle School, Keeling, both magnet, non-magnet, LBJ and LASA, and the former Liberal Arts Academy at Johnston. So none of my immediate or extended family are affected by any of these changes. But because I've been here a long time and I've been an advocate, I put together a little timeline of 40, actually 50 years. I wasn't here in the 70s, just so you know. But I put together kind of a highlights or lowlights, depending on how you want to look at them, of changes, consolidations, and closures that have been inflicted on East Austin for a very long time. And if you go back and do some research, the 1987 end of crosstown busing identified 16 schools that were going to be either 80% African American or 80% Hispanic. And those schools received some very short-lived support from the district, smaller classes, counselors, highly qualified teachers. But if you look at those 16 schools, you will keep seeing them in discussions of closure from 87 to now. So I think I talked so long, I forgot your initial question. I'm sorry.
No. So yeah, what's most important for our families to understand about our histories, boundaries, and feeder patterns?
I think the most important thing to understand about the history is that AISD keeps repeating the worst elements of previous mistakes. So that's why I think it's important for all of us here to work collaboratively, to remind them of that, and to offer meaningful suggestions on what they can do better, but more importantly, why they need to do better. So to me, that's the big takeaway, because I may be a member of the University Hills Neighborhood Association, but this is all my neighborhood. This is all my area. So I'm willing to roll up my sleeves, even though my children have been out since 2000, because these issues are important. They're neighborhood issues, they're quality of life issues, and none of us can afford to turn our backs on those schools.
Thank you, Roxanne. What are the main proposed changes affecting Windsor Park, Pecan Springs, and University Hills? Nadia, do you mind answering that one?
Well, that's a big one. Well, I'm going to just expand what Roxanne said before kind of going into changes, because I think the big changes that have happened here just in the last 15 years was that Pierce Middle School and Gus Garcia, which were all gender schools, were closed due to low performance. So the same thing we're seeing now. And then they were reopened as single genders without community input and without, and they kind of silently rezoned our entire area to 4 out of area middle schools. Lamar, Dobie, Webb, and Martin. And they did that without community input. They just divided our neighborhood up and sent our kids to other middle schools. And so what we have now are 2 single gender schools in our area, right? That is the broader Windsor Park, University Hills, Pecan Springs, and east of us, Colony Park, and Las Cimas, is that what that neighborhood is, where LBJ is? Right, that whole area used to have 2 core middle schools, and those are gone in terms of all genders. So for the last 4 years, since they had decided to build a middle school in Mueller, those neighborhoods got together and said, we want an all gender option. We want to have an option to have our kids in the neighborhood. And I think over those years too, the single gender schools have been supported. They've done well. They are in a good position right now, and they don't grow because there's a certain amount of people who want single gender. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing now. So that advocacy for those years was really about trying to get the district to understand our history so that they could see it and why it was important for us to have a school we could all attend. And then fast forward to now, they have proposed a plan, and we asked them to zone Marshall 3 years ago, and every year they have said, no, we won't, we can't zone it yet because we can't tell if the numbers are right, and blah, blah, blah. And I think there's 600 kids there now, with the 3 grades filled, and they have capacity for 800. So they could have zoned it, and they didn't. And for us, it was a matter of when there's uncertainty always, then you have to live with that uncertainty, and that causes damage and choices. And like we have a family last year actually who my son is in school with, and they probably would have gone to Marshall and they would have potentially stayed together, but that student, we didn't have tracking transfers for any of our schools to Marshall, so all friends who would have gotten tracking transfers couldn't rely on those. So they chose another school in the meantime because they had to have something certain. So that's just an example of what it means not to have a underlying feeder pattern or a zone. So the big changes in this area, I think we were expecting to get zoned to Marshall, and the Andrews area and the Harris area were not switched to Marshall. Right? In the original 10 years ago blow up, where some went to Lamar, some went to Harris, some went to Martin, and some went to Dobie, those were slated, they were, I think, currently zoned to Webb. And so those 2 areas have stayed in the chart as going to Webb. And then the other big thing was that they expanded zones, right? So they redistributed the zones, and the elementary schools are supposedly going to be more balanced because of that. And then the third thing is the WIN program, which they are proposing to unzone it, first of all. And like the wall-to-wall dual language programs, they're proposing to unzone them and move them to other neighborhood schools, which then also must be closed as a result. So to me, they're doing what they did to us with single gender a long time ago to 4 communities for no reason. And so the WIN proposal currently is that they move the program to Go Valley, but the TAP plan would move to Andrews, who isn't currently under a 3F TAP. They're under a much less restrictive 2F TAP. So if the TAP for WIN is put on Andrews, Andrews has to undergo a really big staff turnover and leadership change. So that is a very big thing that I don't think people are aware of. And then the proposal for WIN is that it's magically going to start up in a new location when it has experienced 3 Fs. They are barely got stability. They're just like, if you just let us alone, we can get our test scores up. But they are going, if they have to follow this plan, that all the students are, none of the students are going, like maybe a quarter of the students will go. Like a lot of families are like, that's way too far for me. It's a 20-minute drive. All of our students who are economically disadvantaged are likely to go to Andrews or Pecan Springs, where they're now zoned. So the staff over there would also experience a whole bunch of new kids that don't know how to do Montessori and they don't know how to help. So nobody thinks it's a good plan.
I appreciate your insight, Nadia, and I see a hand. We will take maybe a few questions after these list of questions because it might come up. So write it down if you don't mind.
And if anyone thinks of other big changes for this area
Yes.
that I haven't mentioned.
Yeah, can you just talk about how our entire neighborhood is now split, the east-west by Berkeley? You mentioned that, everywhere west of Berkeley now goes to Harris.
We're getting into it. Okay.
Okay.
So the next question is, many families are now split across multiple schools and feeder patterns, even crossing major highways. From your perspective, what are the biggest risks of dividing neighborhoods this way, and how might we advocate for more coherent, connected boundaries? Roxanne, I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, the big risk is that you create a lot of instability. It makes it difficult for parents to stay as engaged in schools as perhaps they would like to be. And one thing, when I was looking at the feeder patterns and looking at some of the information Nadia provided, one of the things I wondered is somewhere buried toward the end of the plan, they talk about grandfathering. And aside from that being kind of an antiquated term, I wondered what it meant for families who are trying to keep their children, together. So if anyone has any information on how that's going to work, and particularly how that's going to work for this area, I'd really like to know.
Nadia, from your perspective, what's the biggest risk of dividing neighborhoods this way?
Well, to me, it comes back to how do we build community around neighborhoods? Because I feel like we are incapable of supporting 4 middle schools that are all struggling, right? This is our current feeder pattern. And so this is such a strong neighborhood. University Hills, Windsor Park has been a strong neighborhood with associations for a long time. And the potential to be able to just support one small set of schools is so great. Yet if they keep dividing us to send us all over, we really can't, right? We end up with winners and losers, and we end up with an inability to spread our resources appropriately. So to me, it is like there's a huge opportunity here that's missed. And I also just heard yesterday that the Mueller neighborhood, now that they have been proposed, the half of the Mueller neighborhood is zoned currently to Maplewood, and they were not interested in going to Marshall and Northeast 2 years ago. But now that their school is proposed to be closed, they're looking at themselves and saying, why doesn't our whole neighborhood zone to the same school? So while I think we have been advocating for 5 years to get Andrews and Harris to Marshall, they are now going to be advocating for themselves to also attend Marshall before Harris and Andrews. So, but and I look at that and I have all these feelings about it, but also they're people too, and they live in a neighborhood too, and they're seeing the same thing we're saying, and they're saying, yeah, we want to be together because we can make a strong thing. So I think that we do need to look at all of our neighbors, including regionally, but trying to fight for the thing that, to me, we want what a lot of other communities have, which is an aligned feeder pattern where we can look around and know that all our kids, even if they're different elementaries, are going to go to middle school together and then to high school. And if they have that opportunity, and if the district wants to create choices all around us that we can pick 2, that's fine. But the one choice we don't have is the aligned feeder pattern, the stability, the stay with your local neighborhood option that is supposed to be the core of this system. So.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Did that address your question too?
I had heard that a lot of the principals and staff are moving around. I mean, obviously there's closing, there's whatever. Is that expected to happen at Blanton and Harris and the neighborhoods or the elementary schools in our neighborhood besides Wynn and Andrews?
Blanton should not see that happen because they're not under a TAP 3F TAP plan. Harris is under a TIP plan, so that and they don't have 3Fs yet, so they will have a plan that is much less severe than what we're seeing at Wynn or at Pecan Springs. Pecan Springs and Wynn are both under 3F TAPs, So they are going to be required for next year to choose a direction that is the three options were only charter takeover, like full, like new model for your school, and adequate staff, basically, which is like all of that requires a principal turnover. And it all at both at Pecan Springs and Wynn TAP meetings, we ask how many of our staff are highly adequate or highly effective for TEA, and both schools the answer was 1. So 1 teacher, yeah, per the like TIA regulations or whatever. And I think they have learned from the Burnett, Webb, and Joby experience that they are also allowed to define what highly effective means and add other parameters that can help get more of their teachers in. Like maybe they have a different certification or have a history that shows they're qualified in some other way. So, but that over half, so like 51% of your staff has to qualify as that. And so it has resulted in massive staff turnover, and it includes leadership turnover. So like for Wynn, we can't really continue their program if they had to replace teachers and staff because of the need for Montessori dual language Texas certified people. And so unfortunately, Pecan Springs is on the path to have a pretty big turnover. And Andrews is on a tip. So they're on a 2F tip, I think. If Wynn's TAP gets put on them, they're having to have that too. Whereas if they're just left alone, then I think like Harris, they could be pretty stable and move forward without as much.
That was actually the next question. So Roxanne, is there anything you want to add? What's the relationship between district's turnaround plans and the proposed closure of Wynn, particularly for campuses like Pecan Springs and Andrews?
Well, one of the things that Nadia said that really resonated with me is the number of highly qualified, highly effective teachers at different schools. And I know regardless of what personnel changes take place, I encourage anyone who's able to get on those, to be part of those panels that screen teachers and principals. I don't have a lot of confidence in the district's ability to identify and to select the best people for the campuses. So I think parent involvement's really going to be crucial as far as that goes.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Can I just ask for a
Please.
clarification real quick? Like, what makes a teacher considered highly effective or what are
I can answer that one.
Okay.
So I was at Dobie, and at that time, TA requirement was that they worked as a highly qualified teacher for 3 years and saw data that showed growth for their student population. So if you worked with a student population that is historically testing lower for a variety of reasons, including language, you didn't qualify to stay at that school because you didn't have data to show, even if you have been a teacher for 20 years there, or in some cases, it was like 32 or something. Yeah. So it really is.
So it's all based on like arbitrary metric.
It's largely
but
largely based on test data, which is largely
dehumanized.
and out of context, right? I have a lot of opinions on that, so I'll try not to get into it. But
And decentivizes teachers from staying at poor performing schools because
Right.
it damages their own careers.
I'll just add one thing.
Yeah,
But
go
culturally
ahead.
responsive teaching, like relationships are number one, right? So if you take their teacher away for a lot of reasons, that damages their academic performance if they were growing. So I know my students that are still at Dobie are suffering this year because they don't have a teacher that they recognize, nor do they have any teacher that they really recognize, including in like electives. So I'm back for our neighborhood. I'll just say this: I'm very nervous for Andrews because they have a TAP that they're inheriting from Wynn, and I know the impact of a TAP on a school community. And then they're also moving to SIM, so it's like we're not setting that school up for success. And my kid's Zoom for Andrews. Okay, so next question. In your experience, what's the most effective way for residents to share specific boundary feedback, such as key roads, apartment complexes, or walk zones, so that community insights meaningfully shape the final plan? We'll start with you, Nadia.
Yeah, I think this is super important because they have a demographer that just laid this out for them, and it wasn't based on anything in real life, like a telephone pole or a road. So I would go, if there's specific things that you can identify, go to they have, right now, all of the feedback is coming to them through these comment cards. And so if you go to like AISD consolidations, there'll be a thing, and then to give feedback, they're like, oh, please drop us a comment card. So you click on that comment word or whatever, and it brings up a Google form, and you have to put in your name and then you say what school you're talking about or whatever. And there's a drop-down menu, was there a drop-down menu that says, I think it says boundary changes?
I think that is one of the options.
Right. Yeah, so
There's
you
a
would
number
go
of
in
drop-down
there.
options you have to pick from.
Yeah, I do not think they have like a upload an image, thing. But you could always, if there is an image or like you need to do a diagram to show them something, I would just email it directly to Rachel French, who is the head of the program. But it would start by just putting your comment in there. Like, don't go through the middle of our apartment complex.
Thank you. And we'll also do an activity after this where we'll have an opportunity to look at that specifically. We have maps printed out and we'll talk about it here. Final question, Roxanne. Some neighbors are especially concerned about Harris and Andrews and Pecan Springs. What advocacy efforts can help these schools receive resources, attention, and stability they need as enrollment shifts?
Well, building on what Nadia started, it's important to reach out to board members, go to board meetings if you can, sign up for citizen communication if you can, write letters and emails to board members, Superintendent Segura and Rachel French. And also, if you have active and engaged PTAs, have them send information as an organization or as a whole. And I don't know, Sharon may need to correct me on if there's any limits on advocacy that individual PTA associations could do, but just be loud, be seen, be visible, and work together as much as you can.
Thank you so much. We have a little bit of time for any questions that came up as we talked. Does anyone have any questions before we move into a small group activity?
I actually have a question, Roxanne. You've been doing this a while, and I'm just curious what, trying to phrase this a little bit more positively than it is in my head right now, but like, what are the chances of being heard?
Let me repeat it for the people who are online. What are the chances of being heard when you're advocating?
Like, are they going to listen to this feedback that we're getting?
Well, I try to be an optimist. I like to think that with social media and the internet and all these other high-tech ways to reach out and touch people in positions of influence, their chances are better. It's easier to magnify voices. So I like to think that they're going to listen more. There's also going to be a trustee election in a couple of years, and there are already some people who are kind of saying and doing things to make me think they may make a decision one way or the other. So that's perhaps an optimal time. I also encourage reaching out to the city of Austin. They're in this with us. They may not know it, and they do a little here and there in terms of funding projects. But if you have a good relationship with a council member who'd be willing to reach out to the trustees, because they have that joint subcommittee where Travis County commissioners, the city council, and the school board all meet quarterly. So I would just, try to leverage those relationships as much as possible so that the noise just magnifies.
I would echo Roxanne's voice. We have a lot of powerhouses in our neighborhood, and I think if we collectively, as a neighborhood, not just Windsor Park, University Hills, Pecan Springs, Mueller, are advocating for very specific things, the likelihood is higher, historically speaking.
I would like to add too
Yes.
that this is a super rough draft they have put forward. Like, they're not even done. They were, part of this draft that's supposed to be voted on in a month is a brand new transportation policy, a brand new transfer and enrollment policy. And they have not outlined any of that very specifically because they're still working on it. Like, just yesterday, they uploaded some diagrams to the resources part of the consolidation page. So they're actively working on it because this timeline was so compressed. Like the same efforts in 2018 took months of like community engagement, and they don't have the time for that this time. So I think they are relying on everyone right now to tell them what they messed up, to try to fix as many things as they can before this gets approved. Like, that's how I think about it.
Thank you, Nadia. Any more questions before we move into small group activity?
I have one question.
Yes.
There's a friend shared something. There's a rally going on Friday for that's led by Education Austin, and one of the things that they're asking for is the district to kind of focus on the academics of these failing schools first, and then slow down the rest of the policy. What's the likelihood of that? Like, it sounds like there's a big rush. Like, I just don't know how realistic it is to ask the district to do that, and whether or not it's like fruitful to be asking for that at this stage.
Let me repeat your question. The question was, there's a rally on Thursday and they're advocating for slowing down the plan and looking at academic baselines, and essentially what's the likelihood of that being successful, and then listening to that. Do y'all have any thoughts initially?
Well, I mean, so far, every time that has been brought up, they've been pretty clear that they have to keep it moving forward because of the timeline for the TAPs. But they could separate a lot of what they're doing and slow down like precise boundary changes or things like that, because I feel like if they got the broad idea and they have to commit to the TAPs, they could approve that and then take more time to do a lot of the other stuff. I also think a lot of the other stuff is ongoing stuff. You know, we've been advocating for enrollment policy changes for years, so they're just going to make some of them right now, and those pieces of that those always are being updated. Like, one of the big things that's supposed to be part of this plan is a regular boundary change process that is more of an administrative one, where they are constantly monitoring the schools and look at when things start to get out of balance and make the changes then. So that is a process that they're going to create, and then it'll probably get refined over time. So I think that the parts of the plan that have to move forward have to move forward because CEA is requiring it. Whereas the other parts, I think it's a like closures and consolidations. They set their own date by which they had to make a change, so they could push that date back. But it also means that, like, normally the enrollment period for schools opens November 11th. I can't imagine they're really going to open it November 11th, but if they want to, then they do need to actually finalize boundaries, right? Because when you go in to rank your schools, it's going to be based on what it says in the system.
Roxanne, do you have any thoughts as well?
Yes, I'd like to say, I think the district is sort of blaming a lot of this chaos on TEA. You know, TEA made me do it. And I'm not totally convinced of that. I think there certainly are elements that could be slowed down, phased in later. And I think it's, Nadia mentioned the boundary changes. I think it's kind of ironic that just a couple of years ago, the district eliminated its Citizen Boundary Advisory Committee. So I'm going to be interested to see how the administration moves forward with regular boundary changes. So.
Thank you for mentioning that. That was my thought as well, is that we will theoretically have more opportunities in the future to provide feedback with boundary changes. We should advocate for that. Yes, Sam.
Can I get the general consensus or the pros and cons of having a wall-to-wall dual language program in our neighborhood? I know that Pickle, I think, is the east side campus that's willing to get this new wall-to-wall program. Is there a world where that would be beneficial to advocate for at, say, we would do Harris, and then we would have, different elementary schools, Gum Springs, Andrews, Bennington, and then we have a specialty program here? Is that something we can advocate for, we should advocate for? What are your thoughts on that?
The question was, what are the pros and cons of a wall-to-wall dual language program, and specifically for our neighborhoods such as Harris? Like, what's the likelihood of us advocating for that and potentially getting that and understanding more of the implications around that?
So you're talking to someone who just submitted like a dissertation practically to the comment card section about why I didn't think that putting wall to wall in all these different communities was a good idea. And there's so many different facets. Like, so one is about resources. Like right now we have a situation where we have wall to wall schools that are taking a lot of dual language resources when we have 56 vacancies at our other schools and 100 and some bilingual teachers who are not bilingual certified, and another 100 some who are like, we have a massive shortage still of teachers for dual language programming, and all of our students who need that program are distributed across 50 schools. All of those schools have dual language. All of them can take non-emergent bilingual students. Most of them do have non-emergent bilingual students in the programs, but they're not necessarily called two-way because no one really knows they're two-way, and they're a little bit two-way. And so over the last few years, we did a lot of advocacy around making sure that all dual language programs could admit all students. And the district started to blur the line between one-way and two-way because they used to define it really clearly. And that really meant that we had a lot of programs at schools with large African-American populations where none of the kids were in DL. And then we had all of these schools on the west side and our wall-to-walls where privileged people were engaging in, taking in these programs and taking up these spots. So there's like, one is like an equity access question. The other is why in the world they decided to have it non-zoned. They have aspirations to create an enrollment system that is equitable. They have never done it before. We have LASA, we have Ann Richards, in which they could have done it, and they haven't. And so they're creating these 4 non-zoned programs, closing an elementary school that already has DL, that really could just be like, hey, we got 2-way DL, come to our school and let's expand our DL because we're awesome, right? They could have done that, but instead they're causing a closure and they're causing that community to have a hole. So everyone who's like an emergent bilingual student in that community will get defaulted to an out-of-area school and then have to jump through a hurdle to get back, and most of them won't, right? And then they're going to have this enrollment system where everyone gets a lottery, and so you fracture a feeder pattern in a neighborhood when you could just it's the same DL program that we have across 50 schools. So my feeling is not like, I'm glad we didn't end up with one right in our neighborhood. Pickle's not a terrible spot for one because they have a very small neighborhoods. They're bounded by all the highways and stuff. But also, why didn't they just leave it at Riley, which is 2 seconds away, so that Riley didn't have to experience a closure? Because it's nearly the right balance. Riley, of all of those 2-way schools, is almost 50-50. It fits within the parameters of an acceptable balance. So I don't know why they're closing Riley when they could have just not closed it and not disrupted whatever was happening at Pickle.
Roxanne, would you like to add anything?
So that's
Yeah, I have real mixed emotions about this, and I think the district needs to go back to the drawing board on this issue because it has not, as far as I can recall, ever implemented either one-way or dual-way 2-language programs at any of the campuses. They vary. The level of quality varies. The qualifications of the teachers vary. How much programs are promoted and bring in students is varied. So I think they need to give this one some more thought, because this could actually be a big win for them if they figure out how to do it right.
Well, and that is from the multilingual ed advisory committee, they are constantly advocating for well implemented dual language at all our schools. And so that is really just like how I think we're seeing the advocacy right now district-wide for what is the baseline academic programming you're going to offer at every single middle and high school, so that we don't look at our local school and think we have to transfer somewhere else to get Algebra 2. So that's the same thing at the elementary. How do we know that every one of these dual language programs is implemented well so that we feel comfortable going to Andrews for DL instead of having to transfer to Blanton, which claims to be somehow better DL? It's the same DL, exact same. And so Harris has the best scores for all DL schools in our area. By the way. So it is a semantics and we also have Overton and Jordan that have DL, and Overton has for the last year has a principal who's super into trying to expand the DL, and even had a whole cohort of African American students who wanted to join DL this year. And then when her enrollment came in, she didn't have a teacher to expand the program. When we have teachers in all these programs that are in much more privileged areas, that could have been potentially a teacher to expand this program at Overton. So it's like, yeah. So
Thank
many
y'all
things.
so much for your expertise and knowledge, and thank you for being here and sharing your information. We're going to transition into our small group activity, and this is the part where we look at community feedback and themes and patterns and concerns that you have already identified from your specific perspective, but also like your neighborhood, right? So we talked a lot about feeder patterns as a concern. So this is the part that we get into. But to start, we'll just take 5 to 7 minutes and introduce yourself to your partners at your table and your biggest concern coming into this meeting.
At this point, we're going to shift into a collaborative feedback at the table. So I'm going to end the video here, and maybe we'll start a new one at the end when we're done. Thank you.